Regina Celi, letare, alleluia, quiaque meruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit, sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deum, alleluia. So we're not allowed to sing that song anymore because Easter's over. Welcome to Bathrobe Chat Live with Steve the Missionary, the live show with Steve the Missionary every week. Hello, Sean. I have missed you, Sean. I was gone 2 weeks ago when you were gone last week. This is the first Bathrobe Chat where I don't have a shirt on under the bathrobe because it's 98 degrees here. And yeah, so I decided to open it with the Regina Celi because it's kind of essentially our last chance to sing it. It's the Easter hymn to Mary, and it's also one of my favorite church songs of all time. So it really sucks that we only get to sing it for a short amount of time every year. At the end, I'll sing something for ordinary time. But today is a very special day in that something really dumb has happened. The Vatican came out with a little document. Now, specifically, the Congregation for Catholic Education, so an office within the Vatican just about Catholic education, came out with a little document, male and female, he created them, toward a path of dialogue on the question of gender theory in education. What? So I woke up this morning to people kind of arguing about this online and saying that it was kind of dumb, and decided to read it myself. And honestly, it's kind of dumb. So we're going to go through it a little bit. I think here's the thing about it. It is both, like most things that come out of the Vatican, it is helpful and not helpful at the same time. So let's talk about this. So let's go about what it is. So the Congregation for Catholic Education, when they publish something, that means that it's written for educators in the Catholic Church. So Catholic principals, Catholic school teachers, educators on a university level, but also like CCD teachers. And in that sense, I think it's really helpful. This is the kind of thing that you want to read if you are a CCD teacher or a Catholic school teacher and your kids are talking about gender theory or like they know somebody who is trans or something like that, and you have no idea what they're talking about and you have no idea how to respond, or even like just vocabulary. You want to read this. It's 30 pages long, but it starts with an introduction saying this is about dialogue, and then moving into what we're going to be talking about. And I literally have some things highlighted, even though they're not highlighted, and then goes into like a brief overview of what's going on. And it went kind of very specific to talking about gender theory as an academic thought process over the last century, and pinpointing in the middle of the last century, we were talking about some of these things about sexuality and about where it fits in our idea of a person, and did a pretty decent rundown of what's going on. So the first section is just called listening to what's going on. And their main point is that there's radical people being radically autonomous in the thought process, is one of them. A radical separation of sex from gender, and to the point of an individual's understanding of gender is more important than their sex. That it's kind of ranked that way. This is an interesting idea. I've never heard of it. I've never heard it put that way, but it kind of makes sense based on what I know and who I've talked to. And then it moves from just like an overview of what's happened in the last century to points of agreement. Let's try to be nice to each other. So these are things like something called a masculinist mentality is something to be avoided, which I love that phrase. They didn't want to use toxic masculinity, so they said masculinist mentality, which I love. And so they move on to things like we should respect every person. We shouldn't. We should uphold the equal dignity of men and women as equal. It's not a masculinist mentality. We should value femininity. And then they said women have a unique understanding of reality, and I circled that because I was not sure if that's. I'm not sure if unique is the correct word, because it's hard to be the femininity is hard to be unique when it's half of everyone. So you guys let me know what you think about that. Yeah, when we talk about women or things that are specific to women or most proper to woman, should we say the word unique? I wasn't entirely sure about that. And then we move on to what's this? Page 11 is the critique of everything. So one thing they said speaks to a gradual process of denaturalization, separating ourselves from nature. And I just said, what does it? Just a question. I'm not sure if it does. If the whole modern understanding of sex and gender and sexuality is about separating ourselves from nature. It might be, but I wasn't entirely sure. So they pinpoint a few things: dualistic anthropology, equal dignity between men and women, equating equal value between men and women, and value meaning like holding properties, not like one is worth more than the other, and a radical break with things that are actually biologically different, and that's their main kind of critique. I was really kind of annoyed with what happens next, which is they give to things like intersexed people, people with actual sexual identity, physical issues. They give a grand total of like 3.5 sentences, and I'm like, come on! Like this physical point is a point that is very important, and something that the church should really talk about and listen about and learn its relationship between an intersex person and somebody who's having gender dysmorphia and all this sort of thing. Like, where does that work, and what is that thought process? They really just mentioned that it exists and really did not do a good job explaining how an educator could address these things with their kids. So that was odd. But the one that really I think we should center in on is this dualistic anthropology. Something that I've mentioned, but not with particularly good vocabulary in the past. I'm just going to read. The underlying presuppositions of these theories can be traced back to a dualistic anthropology, separating body, reduced to the status of inert matter, from human will, which itself becomes an absolute that can manipulate the body as it pleases. This combination of physicalism and voluntarism can give rise to relativism. All right. So what does that mean? And I've addressed this in videos before, and I'm trying to come up with the best way to explain. The dualistic anthropology. Anthropology just means your image, your understanding of what a human person is. So a dualist says that there is a mind and there is a body, and they are separate things that happen to fit in the same location of a person. Thank you, Alex, for noticing my chest hair. Meaning things like I am my own will, I am my own understanding, and my intellect, and my my ability to make my own choices, and my body is just another thing I make choices about. And I am blanking on the word for it. That I'm an individual. I am autonomous. There's a radical autonomy placed in this dualistic anthropology. My body is just another thing that I am in charge of and able to change. So there's a couple things about that. The Christian idea, and it comes from man and woman, he created them, that line specifically in the Bible, but also a Christian anthropology that goes back all the way to before Christ, is that we are a body and a soul combined. That's part of the tragedy of death. Death is when the soul leaves the body, and that is not the state that we were supposed to ever be. But here we are in a world with death, and the soul leaves the body, leaving, and it's part of why death is so kind of scary or horrendous. Is that sort of an unnatural thing for us? And it's also why we demand a respect for a person's dead body. They're not there anymore. They are dead, but they shouldn't be mangled. They shouldn't be composted. They shouldn't be just tossed out. They should be buried or cremated and then buried in a way proper to the body of a person, because a person is a combination of body and soul. And when you say, no, we are dualists, I am a brain, I'm a mind that inhabits a body, or I'm a soul that inhabits a body, then my body is kind of my own kingdom that I get to decide what happens to it. And this turns into things like, you see radical autonomy as a massive point in pro-abortion language. They say it a lot. No other person is allowed to violate my autonomy against my will, including a fetus. And so I'm seeing it more and more often. It's kind of scary. They say, yes, a fetus is a person, a fetus is alive, and to get rid of your pregnancy is to kill a living human fetus. But that's okay, because that living human fetus is currently violating my autonomy, and my autonomy is more important. And that comes specifically out of a dualistic anthropology. And another thing that a dualistic anthropology can say is my body is not the way I want it to be. And I can, by rights, because of my autonomy and because I am a will, can change it, and can change its gender, can change its gender expression, like a dude that wants to wear a skirt, that's a change of gender expression. But then it moves on to, I want to change its sex. And that's where you are changing the body in ways that can only happen in a dualistic anthropology and not in a Christian anthropology, as far as I can understand from this document. So that's, I think, the big sticking point. Everything else is kind of secondary to that, is please don't be a dualist when you are dealing with this sort of thing. And then they go on to like rational arguments that you can go back and forth. So one is their completely not good enough argument about, or kind of tipping their hat to the understanding that there is such thing as an intersex person. And moving into talking about people who are a third gender, non-binary, transgender, for one paragraph, and talking about how it's supposed to negate, supersede, and be a provocative display against so-called traditional frameworks. And that absolutely happens. The internet just had this big old argument about, drag queen reading time at libraries. And that can definitely be like, a performative, provocative and performative display against traditional frameworks. But there are people who are genuinely clashing with their body, and the Catholic Church, or at least this document, is not helping them. It does, and I'll get, I think, to why in a second. But it spends the rest of the document doing two things. One, talking about sexual differences between men and women and complementarity and all of that sort of thing. And if you want more information on that, ask John Paul II or Ask That Catholic Couple, because they love talking about complementarity, proposing the Christian anthropology, which is all about, like I said, the two are together, the body and soul, and then talking about how all of this really dismantles the family, and doing a really interesting thing. A child learns a person identity, and they're using a lot of Martin Buber. Wow, Alex Parra coming in late and wants to know the name of the document. The document came out today from the Congregation of Catholic Education. It's called Male and Female He Created Them Toward a Path of Dialogue on the Question of Gender Theory in Education. And that's for everyone else who came late. That's the name of the document. It came out today. It is a very low-level document. Like, on the scope of things, this is essentially an interior memo from a higher up office to all other educating Catholics. So that's the level of intensity you should be reading this, or not reading it, because not everyone needs to read this sort of thing. Just people with podcasts and educators. Talking about children. I'm going to quote it. Children enjoy another right. They talk about two rights. The first is the right of parents to educate their children, and the other one is to children enjoy the right, which is of equal importance, to grow up in a family with a father and a mother capable of creating a suitable environment for the child's development and emotional maturity. So children have a right to a father and a mother, and which is strange to me because there are a lot of places where children aren't growing up with a father and a mother. Maybe we should regard those as just as much of a tragedy as as everything else that this document is trying to address. And they're using a lot of like Martin Buber 20th century phenomenology to talk about my identity. When I learn about my identity, when I was learning about it as a child, I was learning about it in this sort of I, thou, I, you motion. I learn my identity because I learn that there is such thing as a you who is separate from me. And there are things about that that are different. And one of the things that we learn our sexual identity is that we have a mom and a dad, and there is a distinct difference between mom and dad, between female and male, and those things are very important. Understanding that there is one and another, and they're different from each other, is important in my understanding of my own identity. Learning that there is such thing as not me is important to figuring out exactly who me is. And when you try to dismantle all of the old understandings of sex and gender, and essentially making them the same, and seeing all distinctions between genders as useless or fake, then you're hurting this process of knowing the distinction, of knowing the spiritual elements and the physical elements and the sexual elements of those distinctions, and helping people come up with discover their own identity, or solidify their own identity. And then it spends the rest of the time talking about how families are the most important, and schools are supplementing the family when it comes to raising children. Here's the thing. I first saw complaints about this online under the context of they didn't ask enough LGBT people for their input on this. And here's a little secret to Vatican documents. They are never good enough. They're never actually what you need at the moment. So this thing is not a doctrinal and pastoral account of how Catholicism broadly and Catholics individually should address every instance of Christians and non-Christians trying to live well, as LGBT people or as people who know LGBT people. That this is not that document. I don't even know if they're ever going to write that document. This is a document this is, again, an inside memo from a higher up office to Catholic educators and the bloggers who want to read it. saying, here are some basic principles of what people are talking about, how they are talking about it, and what the most basic doctrinal responses are. This is not a very nuanced document. It's really for people who have never thought about this before, or who are encountering it in a real way for the first time as educators. And also, so like first time parents as well. So that's why it's lacking the input from the LGBT community, because the first half of the document is, here's how you listen to people, and here is an idea of where people will be coming from when they bring you these ideas. So you have to have a method of listening before you listen. So this is the document that comes before we have listened to some LGBT people, and here's what we think so far. And that's why it's less than what you hoped. Vatican documents are always going to be less than what you hoped. It's just the way it is. Outside of that, I hope it's good enough for what it does. I genuinely hope that Catholic junior high teachers read these documents. Catholic CCD teachers read these documents, or this one document, giving them a kind of a kind of groundwork to say, oh, this is what I think. And if it's kind of funny how the more you read these sort of Vatican documents is how much it assumes a well-formed conscience. They're not going to give you the answers. They're going to give you the structure from which the answers should come. And then they send you off on your merry little way to do the thing that is Christianity, So that's what this is. So it's not complete. Is what I'm going to say, Shaggy. Who hasn't thought about it before? I mean, not in depth, but who hasn't even thought about it? You'd be amazed. And you'd be amazed, not only the number of people who haven't thought about it before, but two, the number of people who have encountered this for the first time and then not known what to do, and so shoved it to the back of their mind and avoided the conversation, avoided the issue, because for the longest time. And that's really what's happening for a lot of Catholic educators. And this document hopefully will help them lovingly address the people standing in front of them asking questions. Because one of the few good things about Catholic youth ministry right now is that the teenagers will ask you the questions. They are not going to sit back and just kind of wait for you to finish droning on and then leave the church. They are going to give you a semi-fair shake and say, this is what I don't like. What do you have to say about it? Back in the day, kids would just slowly leave. But now they want to say their piece first, which is nice because you get to actually respond to it as opposed to silently learn that they've left the church. All right. How do you guys feel? This is it's the end of ordinary time. It's the beginning of everything else. It's kind of funny because it's the end of Easter and the beginning of ordinary time, but the next 2 weeks are going to be like massive celebrations for the church. So let's see. This was Pentecost. Next week is Holy Trinity Sunday, where your poor priest is going to be giving the hardest sermon of the year, the hardest homily of the year. And the week after that is Corpus Christi Sunday, which is another difficult homily, but a little bit more fun. And then you get just like regular old green vestment, normal songs, mass on Sunday, which I always find funny about how it's ordinary time, but for the first 2 weeks, there's still feasts and parties. So, and my first video after Corpus Christi is going to kind of address that. I'm really excited for this next month. I just recorded all the videos for the next month coming up, and I really hope that you guys appreciate, watch them, and I really hope to see you guys around in the comments and on the Patreon and here in this chat. All right, last questions for Steve the Missionary before I go and edit tomorrow's video. I hope everything's going well for you. I hope you guys had a good Easter and a good ordinary time. Shaggy wants to know, how is Trinity the most difficult of the year? What about the church financial report? In my parish, the priest doesn't do the annual church financial report. Like, one of the people from the finance council does the church financial report, so he pawns it off. I would too. Let's be real. Ashley wants to know how I'm doing. Thanks, Ashley. I'm doing just fine. Um, and especially after I got all that writing and filming done, that was hanging over my head. And now I just get to edit, which is both horrendously boring and where all the real creativity happens. So this should be a ton of fun. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I will see you all next week on the live chat, and I'll see you tomorrow with a brand new video. All right. The pod is ended. Go in peace. I forgot to sing. I forgot to sing for you guys. The ordinary time song is, of course, Salve Regina. So let's I started in Easter. Let's end in ordinary time. Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus, exules filii Eva, ad te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in ac lacrimarum vale. Ea ergo, advocata nostra, ilos tuos, misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exiliu ostende. O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria.